We'll start the recording so that we are going to have this on the YouTube channel as well. So hello, everybody on Facebook. Sorry that we're a few minutes late. We were having the conversation earlier that, you know, I don't know if we're going back to live events because I'm pretty used to just putting on the shirt. Steve was saying the same thing. I've got sweatpants and no shoes on right now. So Timothy, not sure what you've got going on, but we don't know yet. I think I saw on Twitter that one of you were going to, I think Timothy, you were going to wear a caftan and Stephen, you were going to put some perfume on. Is that what I saw you guys talking about?
I think he was going to own their perfume. That's what I was expecting.
Exactly. And if you're on Facebook or YouTube right now and you don't follow these two gentlemen on Twitter, please go do that. It is well worth the entertainment value of being there and seeing what they're doing. So welcome, Stephen. Welcome, Timothy. Congratulations on the new book. Can't wait for this conversation and hear you talk about the Perfume Thief. It was out what, yesterday?
Yeah, just came out.
So we are in the celebration mode still with it. So just real quick about Warwick's, and hopefully Stephen's had the I was just going to say Stephen's had the pleasure of coming to Warwick's. A little hubris of me to say that, but
he keeps coming back. I don't know.
But actually coming to the store. So Timothy, hopefully one day we will have you at the store when we're doing live events. So
yeah, I'm ready. Anytime.
I'm on my way. Ready for that. Just real quick about Warwick's. I will be in the background after I introduce the program. I'll be in the background in the comment section. I'm going to put a link in there to order that you can easily order the Perfume Thief from Warwick's. I'll put the Guncle in there as well. You can easily click that link and order it too. I always like to say any way that there is to get a book, you can get it from Warwick's. We could ship it to you, but we would love you to come by the store. So if you're in we're located in San Diego, La Jolla, California. But so if you're in our area, we'd love for you to stop by so you can still click that link and reserve your copy and just pick it up at the store and maybe browse around at some other things. Also in the comment section, if you have a question for Timothy or Stephen, don't be shy and go ahead and put those into the comment section. They're going to chat for about 30-ish minutes about the Perfume Thief and other things and other fun stuff. And so don't be shy. We always love the audience questions. So go ahead and put those in there too, and I'll feed those into them when they're done chatting. So here we go. I'm going to introduce both of you and then I go off screen. So Timothy, I'm going to say your name. Is it Schaffert?
Well, I say Schaffert.
Schaffert. Okay, yeah. Timothy Schaffert is the author of 5 previous novels: The Swan Gondola, The Coffins of Little Hope, Devils in the Sugar Shop, The Singing and Dancing Daughters of God, and The Phantom Limbs of the Rolling Sisters. Stephen, if you don't ask him how he comes up with his titles of books, I will later.
On my list of questions.
Because these are some of the best. So I'm so glad that's one of your questions. He is a professor of English and director of creative writing at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And he writes the column, The Eccentricities of Gentlemen, for the popular lifestyle magazine, Enchanted Living. As I said, he's here today to talk about his latest book, The Perfume Thief. And with him is one of our absolute favorites, Stephen Rowley. Stephen is the author of The Guncle, the editor, and the national bestseller, Lily and the Octopus, which has been translated into 19 languages. And he might have a little news later about The Guncle too. We might get to that if we have some time. He has worked as a freelance writer, newspaper columnist, and screenwriter. Originally from Portland, Maine, Rowley is a graduate of Emerson College. He lives in Palm Springs, California. With that, gentlemen, have a great conversation. See you in a little bit.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie and Timothy. It is so great to meet you. Finally, I know we've been social media friends for a while. I got the opportunity to read The Perfume Thief early, which I'm very grateful for. You were very kind with your early support for my book, The Guncle. And so this is just a real joy to finally be, well, almost together. So thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you. And I have to apologize. I'm the reason that we're starting late. I don't know. I guess I thought it was just going to kind of sort of magically appear and consume me. I didn't realize I had some additional steps I had to take. So,
but you made it. I know this is the problem with doing virtual events. You know, I'm coming to you from my home. Are you in your office or at home or?
Yes, this is my office.
Yes, yeah. So
my office at home.
Publicists or media guides, you know, dragging us around like we might if we were doing this in person. So we're kind of on our own, and I am not a technically proficient person. So,
well, it's very nice of you to do this. I mean, I should say also that this is our first time meeting, that we don't know each other, and so this is very generous of you to take time to have this conversation.
Well, I love the book. I'm thrilled to be here. It's only been out on shelves for 24 hours now. So I'll try to avoid too many spoilery type things, definitely steer me clear if we get too close, because I want people to have the opportunity to read the book fresh and be enchanted by it the way I was. But let's talk about those titles for a second, because my book, The Guncle, my last book was called The Editor. I feel like I'm terrible with titles. I had a novel, Lily and the Octopus, but when I wrote it, it was called The Octopus, and it was the publisher who changed it. So, Julie ran down some of your spectacular titles. What comes first, the manuscript or the story or the title?
It seems like they end up kind of coming around at the same time. As I'm conjuring up the story and figuring it out, the titles kind of come along. Now, The Perfume Thief actually had a terrible title to begin with. And it was actually while I was in conversation with the writer David Ebershoff, who visited Nebraska for some programming that we were doing here. I took the opportunity to tell him about the book, and I told him the title, and he's like, "Why are you calling it that? Why did you call it The Perfume Thief?" And I'm like, "Well, that's the real title. Yes."
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I was a test for him. Yeah.
Right.
And he passed. Bravo. Yeah. Titles and covers can sometimes be fraught, but I think you hit a home run both, because the cover is gorgeous too. And I hope you're happy.
Oh, absolutely.
I think some people don't know. I don't know how it is for you, but for me, contractually, I think authors often get what's called meaningful consultation with titles and covers, and try defining that in a court of law, I guess.
Right. It just sort of means that you can complain about it if you don't like it.
Exactly. But you hit a home run. So I kind of want to start for the moment, and everybody, indeed, please ask questions, because I'd much rather talk about what the audience wants to hear than just blather on for a while. But let me get us started at least. I wrote a novel in The Guncle that takes place in Palm Springs, where I live and where I've been sheltering at home for the past 15, 16 months. I haven't done a lot of traveling until recently. You wrote a novel that takes place in Paris. So you have been able to get out of Omaha, where you are, at least through your work and creatively. So my first question comes in two parts. Are you a genius, and am I an idiot?
I'm going to say no and no to that. Yeah, I mean, I guess, and actually that was kind of a question I had for you too, is like, because you're The Guncle's very much in conversation with the world today, that these are characters who are clearly living in the 21st century and dealing with 21st century problems and situations and certain levels of liberation compared to the past and such. And so it's that, and that in and of itself is a different experience than writing about the deep past. And so I think I wonder, like, if you're tempted to write about history, or do you really see yourself as writing about the things that are going on around you currently?
Well, I'll actually amend that question slightly, and so that the answer is that we're both actually geniuses, because
Perfect.
The Perfume Thief is also about isolation a lot, is a theme throughout your book, as it is in The Guncle. It's about a character who's sort of been self-isolating. Now, it takes a long time to write a book, and publishing is a long lead industry. So full disclosure, I at least had mostly completed mine before the beginning of the pandemic. But to the extent that they're both explore isolation and the effects of that, we've kind of written our COVID books. And so pressure's off. Woo!
Right.
I know a lot of writers are reticent to write about this time. So I'm just going to say we've done it, and bravo us.
Right, exactly. When I had finished the book before COVID, but I was doing a lot of heavy revisions during it, and so it did really parallel and ultimately influence, and some things got added as I considered, like, how these characters would have survived the Spanish flu and how that might influence their own sense of Paris. So it did end up creeping into the book ultimately.
Yeah, I guess we should just backpedal just for a moment here, and to give readers, because again, it's only been out for a day now, just a little bit of a log line or a snippet of of how you would just sort of describe the book, so that we can then talk about it and sort of have our conversation be a little clearer.
Yeah, sure. So Clementine is the narrator, the first person narrator. She's 72 years old. She's American, and she's lived a life of crime. And for various reasons, she's committed herself to the theft of perfume, rare perfumes, any variety, anything connected to perfumes. And so ultimately, she gives up crimes, thinks she's retiring to Paris, a little perfume shop on the Rue de Vaugirard, and but ultimately, with the invasion in 1940, when the Nazis arrived in Paris, she's kind of compelled by reputation into a situation where she's seeking a perfume diary, which appeals to her interest and her own sense of self, as well as serving a kind of an element of resistance during the occupation. And so it's really about this this experience of this process of gaining access with this Francophile Nazi named Oscar Voss. And so much of it's about their conversation, and he's seeking, they're unsure, each is unsure of what the other one wants, basically, and so they're making assumptions. So they're doing this kind of dance throughout the book, which ultimately involves Clementine entrusting him with a story from her past. So the novel is also partly set in 1890s Manhattan.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. I love Clementine so much. I mean, right from the first paragraph, the way she talks about herself and describes herself, almost like Katharine Hepburn-esque in the way that she dresses and presents herself. But the Los Angeles Times, I know, called Clementine one of the great characters of summer, and I totally agree. But what's it like? Again, here I took the easy route because my main character in the Guncle is probably the closest character I've ever written to myself. But the challenge of undertaking, and I'm sorry, I don't know if you've done this before, but a writing in the first person for a character of the opposite sex, is that a challenge that you've undertaken before? And how much of you is in Clementine, and what was the hardest part to get about her voice?
Sure. I did write a first-person novel from the point of view of an 80-year-old woman in the coffins of Little Hope, about an 80-year-old.
Yeah, in 20 more years, you'll be down to a teenager. Yeah.
Right. And so, and I did love that character and that realm, and so for Clementine, ultimately though, I feel close to Clementine as well, and she was really designed to respond to the world in a way that I think I would respond, to ask the questions and to give the answers that I think I would give in certain situations. And I'm not a thief. I've had nothing as glamorous as an international career as a thief, but or owned a perfume shop in Paris or any. So the particulars of her life are completely radically different from my own. But I think that I guess I found myself drawing from some aspect of my own personality.
Well, you say you're not a thief, but T.S. Eliot had that line, right? Good writers borrow, great writers steal. So intentionally or unintentionally, are all writers thieves to a certain extent, whether it's stealing from other artists or other art forms, or unintentionally from people or details that we observe in life?
Yeah, I mean, so much. Well, that's kind of the conflict when you're writing historical fiction too, because I do sometimes write stuff that's said in the present day, but even then readers would say there was an antique quality to them, so it seemed like it was but I'm able to when you're writing about the present, you can kind of make things up, or you have a sense of gauge of measurement of like what you can make up and what you should remain true to. And when you're writing about the rural Midwest, then you can kind of make everything up, really. I mean, as opposed to if you're writing about New York or Los Angeles, when you kind of want to get it right. I mean, if you're going to write about a place, you want it to at least fit in with the landscape. And so I guess, so that was the question as I was doing the research is, well, is it, am I really indulging my imagination if I'm drawing out the facts, that somebody else has recorded? So I tried to rely largely on newspaper archives and the Vogue magazine archives and old issues of Google Books, trying to gather material that really hasn't been exploited or used in other books or other movies. And so I was really actively looking for that stuff that kind of actually was real life but fit with my imagination. And that was that melding that I was looking for. So yes, the answer is yes. I'm a thief. We're thieves. And, we're thick as thieves.
All right, got you. Ready-handed.
That's right.
Well, you know, I think because we're all guilty to a certain extent. So if anyone listening is not familiar with the term gunkle, it's become very sort of popular slang, I guess, in the last 5 or 10 years for a gay uncle, which this character is. But more than that, it has sort of this air of fabulous, larger than life quality. And so I stole very heavily from Auntie Mame. But I think there's a way we do it ethically, right? And I was really interested, for me, in a challenge of Patrick Dennis, who wrote the 1955 novel, was closeted. He had a wife and kids and came out at least as bisexual later in his life, although he died tragically young. But it got me very interested in the idea of writers from the previous century, gay male writers or even closeted writers. Another one, Tennessee Williams, comes to mind also, who wrote these sort of larger than life women, perhaps as stand-ins for gay men who they couldn't write openly about that experience. And so it was an interesting sort of, even though I was kind of stealing a little bit, it was interesting as an exercise to perhaps like reclaim a character that might have been imagined that way if the times had allowed for it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I don't know, that just popped to me as an example. But I do, to the extent that I stole from my nieces and nephews, and I did for little details, I dedicated the book to them. So hopefully,
right. That's fair game. That's you can steal from your family and you can steal personal experiences.
I feel sorry for any of you who are related to writers, keep us at an arm's length. But I've always loved stories about artists and actors during wartime or during great times of crisis, because I think art has such an important role during even in this past year, like something like Netflix or being able to read has gotten us as we felt very disconnected from one another, has been a way to allow us to stay connected. So, how do you view the sort of role of art during difficult times? Also, is that something you were thinking about in the past year?
Oh, for sure. I mean, and the role of art in the French Resistance as well, and how so often, I guess, the humanities or the arts in general are can be seen as frivolous in times of war or some such, and that usually the histories of war that we read about are about strategies and such, and politics and military, and so the histories tend to be very muscular in that sense. But what I found in my research really is that the arts were at the very heart of conflict, that certainly for the Nazis and for the French during World War II, Paris was really epitomized or identified elements of their aspects and perceptions of conquest and defeat. And so really there was so much that's at war is about culture and about about music and about fashion and about, so all of these frivolous things actually add up to things of great value. And so I think that that's all absolutely central to, the arts is central to how we engage with the world and how we understand and interpret even the worst circumstances.
Yeah, yeah, and particularly during wartime too. I think of like Cabaret, or there are all sorts of wonderful examples of stories about artists during wartime that have always sort of captured my imagination.
Well, and that was what part of the fascinating thing about the occupation too, is that on the one hand, at first the Nazis were going to blow up the city when they arrived. So they wanted to defeat, they wanted to proclaim dominance over the city and over the French and over their culture. But then ultimately they didn't bomb it, and then they ultimately rewarded their soldiers with opportunities to stay in Paris or to live in Paris, and so they wanted everything that was great about Paris, and they wanted to own it and possess it, but they also wanted all of Paris to be German. And so there's these interesting contradictory impulses in terms of how they're going to address culture, at the same time recognizing that the French loved their culture and felt that it was superior, that they loved their own music and their own art. Yeah. and so they in order to actually live among the people that they were capturing, they had to consider how they were going to how they were going to live, how they were all going to kind of live together in this culture. And look at military uniform. I mean, that's fashion. That's art. That's an expression of beauty to a certain degree. And so it's and the way that the cultures expanded was in search of scent and spice and flavor, and so that's the way that that cultures have melded, is in this search for intoxication.
Yeah. Well, you meant this is a good opening here, because you mentioned scent as intoxicating, and it certainly is. It's one of our strongest sort of sense memories, or in terms of triggering memory or nostalgia. That sense can be so incredibly powerful. And so, and I'm sure you've done research into the science of why that is, or could speak more to that in line. But on a personal level, are there scents that evoke strong memories for you, even if it's a sort of time of writing your other works, or that have you ever associated scents with any of your other writing and whatnot too?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about the role of scent in the other books, although I do always think about the senses. And in like creative writing classes, we spend a lot of time talking about the senses and how to evoke them, and the role of metaphor in defining those senses, and the ethereal, how to define the ethereal in fiction. And so I'll bring, so in my novel, the Nazis, quite taken with the work of Marcel Proust, who is the great progenitor of nostalgia and memory, and with the little tea cakes that he dipped in tea that took him back, to his childhood. And so I make those little madeleines for my students and bring them to class, and we talk about the influence of tapping into those memories and that nostalgia, and how to draw from that in order to create dynamic fiction. And so but yeah, I like, for me, black licorice is, or anise oil, just takes me way back to childhood holidays. And my grandmother had a soap collection, and so it was like novelty soaps, like little shaped like ducks, or the Dion quintuplets, and all of these other collections that she'd taken up over the years, that she kept in these cabinets. And we weren't, of course, allowed to touch them, but we could lean in and smell them, and so that scent, that confluence of perfumed soap, certainly makes me nostalgic as well. And it's funny, because like you can have that scent memory, and then that links to another memory and another memory. I mean, even if it's a bad scent, like like the scent of chlorine will always remind me of the swimming pool, in town when I was a kid, all these farm kids. I mean, I'm sure they probably had to use a bunch of chlorine because all of these dirty farm kids were taking a bath together in the pool, basically. So and that brings me
That's the
back.
title of your next novel, Dirty Farm Kids Taking a Bath Together.
So that, and then that reminds me of, the teenage boys and girls who were the lifeguards, and always seemed so glamorous to me as a
Yeah.
kid, because they're set up there on their perch, all suntan and freckled, and their hair bleaching blonde, and so it was, and the little slush puppies that you would get at the at the counter. So so I think
And it always be surprising. I remember being in a it was like I think it was like an outlet shopping mall or something, like something like it was like on a road trip, and it no expectation of anything. And I walked into this building that had this like slightly musty scent. Anyway, I was immediately transported to being backstage at my high school theater, where I was in drama club, like waiting to go on stage. And it was such an overwhelming sensation, and I haven't so evocatively felt that. We have, like, anybody who's done any theater or anything like that has had dreams where like you're about to go on and you don't know the lines, but this was like that, the energy in a really exciting way about being ready to go on and being totally prepared. And I haven't, I mean, I was like, God, I almost wanted to weep because it was so overwhelming and completely unexpected. And there's no other sense, I think, that could do that, really. Certainly not looking at a theater or watching someone else perform a high school play, or none of that would have had the same reaction. And it's powerful.
Yeah, you need to put that in your next book. That's because even just you mentioning it takes me backstage, and I'm smelling the smells of that, and the makeup that smell of that makeup, and the sponges.
Oh yeah, the sponges that were never clean, so they talk about musty. Yeah. Yeah, and the slight burning smell from the lights and the burning dust when you turn them on and whatnot. Yeah, it's really powerful. I think music for me can transport me as well. It doesn't. I'll remember a time when I heard this song before, but it won't be. It's not quite the same. It doesn't have. It's not like I'm not transported quite in the same way. I might be nostalgic for, but I'm not there. Whereas a scent can really overwhelm.
Yeah, I am.
You're freezing up for me. I'm not sure if that's happening for anybody else.
Oh, am I back? Is it
all right? There you are. Now you're back.
Okay.
Julie popped in. She was on mute. Now you're back. You're back.
Okay, terrific. I was just talking about, I was saying that my mind's been on my brain a lot lately because I had these little mini strokes during the pandemic that sort of wiped out. So it was sudden, just all of a sudden I was started noticing that that things that I would normally be able to bring back weren't coming. And so, so it was, so I had an MRI, and I saw a neurologist, then a neuropsychologist. And so they were able to at least rule out anything too bad, that I had some other brain damage, presumably from a concussion I had when I was a year and a half years old, when I fell off some bleachers. So but the point I'm getting to is that there have been these moments when moments of deja vu, really, which are kind of hard to explain, where sometimes they were memories of scents, and that would just come to mind, and I wouldn't necessarily have a memory associated with it, but it would just literally take me back, and I would feel it. I would have the sense of it without really having visual image of what it all happens. And you'd feel it in your stomach, like in a roller coaster, this rush of nostalgia and memory. So
yeah, it's truly incredible. I know we want to leave time for people to ask questions and invite Julie back into our conversation. I just have one more question that I was really fascinated about because I'm so taken with Clementine as a character, but I'm interested in the idea of sort of the unreliable narrator, because here Clementine is a thief. She's a career thief. And she's narrating this story in the first person. And so she is telling us a story, the reader, but the plot of the book is she's also telling a story, sort of a story for her life, to this, Nazi character as well. So she's telling two stories kind of, or we're experiencing it on two levels. And so, I don't really know what my question, other than I'm sort of fascinated by the challenges of that, taking on sort of two storytellings that stacked like that. And do you think of her as reliable or unreliable, or is this sort of one last con in a way?
I think she is reliable because I think the people around her should find her somewhat unreliable. But I think as a narrator, she's frank about what we can believe of what she's saying but I think sometimes there are moments when I think she perhaps interprets herself and her actions differently than we might as readers. But I think she means to be fairly clear in her descriptions and definitions and her analysis of the situation, so that she's trying to fool those people around her, but she's not invested in fooling the reader.
Fooling us. Good. I love her so much. I want to be in on it just because right. I adore her so. I want to be, a part of the team. So anyway, what if we invite Julie back in and see if we have questions that are...
We do. We have great comments too. Hello, I'm back.
Great.
I mean, it said too, Clementine is dapper and a total badass was one of the comments. And
Agreed.
Yeah. And so I love that. And so Arlene is asking a question, and she apologizes because she popped in late. And we covered a little bit of it,
so
but
it's
yeah. We're all late today. It feels like a Monday, only it's a Wednesday, right? So she says, for Timothy, what was the most inspiring, and we might have covered a little bit of this, but I think it's worth repeating some of it. What was the most inspiring and most challenging experience in writing this book?
Well, I guess I would go back to what Stephen was talking about in terms of those two different stories that were at work. I mean, it took a long time to get that measured right in the book, and I hope that I did, but one just eventually has to just decide that they did and move on. But it was different, and it was much different in the book that my editor bought, and then it became much different in the editorial process just prior to sort of sending it out to the world. So it was because it's kind of a delicate balance, especially when the character is telling a story, which she really is in the book, which can be really, I mean, as a reader, sometimes when a character says, well, let me tell you about this, you kind of drift off sometimes, but so you wanted to, so I wanted to keep the story, even though there's the present of the story is 1941, you also want the present of the story to be the 1896 chapters as well. So that was a really tricky thing for me to gauge, and it meant moving pieces around and reevaluating exactly how that information was going to be delivered.
Yeah. Well, you succeeded. There's an immediacy to both sections that is truly page turning. So.
Did you cover either of these time periods in any of your previous works? Did you ever cover any of these?
The 1890s is so the Swan Gondola is set in 1898. So I was very familiar with the turn of the century when I sent Clementine to Manhattan. I didn't, but it was set in 1898 in Omaha. As I was writing it, I was kind of fashioning Swan Gondola, or imagining it as a prequel to The Wizard of Oz, because if you remember the original book, the wizard is said to be from Omaha, and he gets in a hot air balloon and lands in Oz. And so I imagined him in Omaha before he lands in Oz. And so it's kind of his experience. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I thieved a lot of details from The Wizard of Oz in putting that novel together. But so then, so the Clementine, though, is in Manhattan, which required a whole other exercise and research, but and what a magical time that was in New York. I mean, it was I could have written a whole other book based on those.
Oh yeah, no, because that's just when everything was exploding. I mean, it was just
I mean, and the details that are in the book are just drawn from newspaper articles. So they're the electric cab that she gets into after she first meets M. That was actually happening. There were reports of that. The way the mail worked, I mean, like, it was fascinating to me that you could get mail like 5 or 6 times a day, and you could write a letter in the morning and have an answer in the afternoon, and then write back again. So it was kind of like email of it.
Maybe the postal service needs to go back to the 1890s.
They were talking about pneumatic tubes at one point that would just shoot the mail through the city, but that kind of coincided with the development of the automobile, so they must have decided to pollute the air instead of send them.
When you decided that, did you guys? I'm sorry, because I got caught up on some other things. Did you guys talk about the perfume aspect and did you research and order a bunch of perfumes from online and like do different scent things? Were you doing anything like that?
I did, to a certain extent. I wanted to polish up my description of perfume. It's very hard to describe scent, and I think there's a gardening book that I found that said, a flower smells most like itself, and so you might want to try to describe how a rose smells, and it's like, well, you can't. So but you can through metaphor. I mean, you can incorporate perhaps how it makes you feel. So I did a lot of experimenting of trying to figure out, well, what does that smell like other than what it smells like,
Yeah.
And so, but you also can't do too much of that in a book, or the reader will fall asleep. So it's
true.
or it becomes, it becomes a long poem.
Yeah, exactly. You need like the smell-o-vision or the smell.
But I also decided that she sort of was a thief of rare scents, and so that was part of the research too, was to find out, well, what would be a rare scent and what would be valuable. Yeah. And so it's fun to look in old books on pharmaceuticals and travel and try to find I collected as many unique scents as I possibly could.
Ooh, very cool. Because there's some things like, like our mothers that wore perfumes back in the day. Some of those can't be even replicated anymore because they can't get the ingredients for them.
Doesn't that drive you mad that you can't even and that's and like Steve and I were talking about the nostalgia of scent, and there's some that we know, but if you don't know what perfume it was that your grandmother wore, then you're never going to find it again, right?
Yeah. So and they claim that they recreate it, but some of those original scents that are either they can't find or it's super expensive. Right. It doesn't really recreate the same scent. It's very interesting. We'll get to a couple other more questions because we've got some coming in. I'm sorry if we can't get to all of them. One more for Stephen here. What did you learn about yourself in the process of writing this book? What was the most helpful feedback that you got in the revision process? You can answer either one of those.
For me, for either of us?
Either of you. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I meant Timothy.
Yeah. Let me just say real fast. I'm jealous sometimes of the research because I wrote a book. The editor, sometimes is classified in some stores as historical fiction. It takes place in 1992, though. But Jacqueline Onassis was a character in it while she was an editor at at Doubleday,
Doubleday,
which
yeah.
she had a marvelous career as a book editor for 15 years after her second husband died. So much research went into that, and sometimes I'm jealous of you, Timothy, for how, like, I'm going to pick a project again. You asked would I write historical fiction. I missed having that research this time around, where I was writing something very contemporary and the character was similar to me. Because when you get stuck, you're kind of stuck. You know, when I had research, I remember always being able to thumb through it, and maybe something will spark just from that. And I wonder if you have a similar experience. If you ever get stuck, does the research help get you unstuck?
It sure does. But then there's also the thing that, like, I decide I need a chapter for something to happen, it's something specific that needs to happen, or I need to move the character someplace else. But you can't just invent. You know, you have to check it. You have to make sure it's of the period and of the city, and so you can't necessarily just draw from your imagination in the same way. So it becomes another. So yeah, the research is helpful, but sometimes you really have to hunt for it, and you're not even necessarily sure you're even going to find it. So, but I have to also mention that. So when I was a kid, my mother subscribed to the Doubleday book club. So at that time, Doubleday had bookstores and a book club, and a publisher. And so my sense of publishing as this little farm kid in the middle of Nebraska was Doubleday. And as I got older, I thought, well, I want Jackie Onassis as my editor when I write her someday.
Well, have I got the book for you?
Yeah. So it's and she died just like before I finished my first novel, so there was no chance of that happening.
So close, so close.
But you're with Doubleday now, isn't that?
Now I'm with. No, that's what's so cute about it.
Yeah. And somebody mentioned, Stephen, in the thing that they're reading the editor right now, and totally enjoying it, and wanted to know what prompted you to write the editor. What was your catalyst on that?
Oh yeah, I've mentioned this before. I've done so many Warwick's events, I'm going to be in danger of repeating myself. But my first novel, Lily and the Octopus, despite being about a dog and an octopus, was deeply autobiographical. I used to try to keep more of an arm's length from it, but there's no denying it now. I said a few things in that book about my mother, and I changed the names for most characters, tried to protect people's identities, but somehow readers cracked the code mom. They figured that one out somehow. And so, I thought they were really beautiful. And I meant them to be that. They were honest, but I thought they were really beautiful. We had a slight disagreement about that, though. So it's all fine now. She's a big fan. However, when it came time to write my follow-up, I wanted to write about that experience because it was something, kind of profound. And so, I didn't want to write the particulars of what happened to me. Weren't an interesting story, but it got me thinking about, a young man who has a sort of semi-autobiographical novel about his mother and his relationship with his mother. And the thing about Lily and the Octopus was I expected it to be a very small book. Again, dog, octopus, like who's going to read this really? And then it became a bestseller, and then it was translated, in all these languages, and there's a movie in the works, and et cetera, et cetera. So it was suddenly much bigger than I intended it to be. So I was like, how could this sort of snowball out of this young writer's control? And I thought, well, if Jacqueline Onassis was his editor, wouldn't it suddenly be a bigger deal? And if he was sort of caught between trying to please his own mother, and then the sort of idealized version of America's mother, on the other hand, that wouldn't that put him in a pickle? So I'm glad you're enjoying it, and but that's it. Really came from my own sort of experience as a writer.
And there was a fascination with Jackie Onassis. I mean, was that just something that you had just used? I mean, she was always there for you as somebody that you admired or whatever. Yeah.
No, it wasn't, not at all. I think, which probably made me a better person to write this book, because I didn't, I always with her, but it wasn't a familial fascination or anything. That was invention for the book. quite honestly, like I remember seeing an episode of Project Runway of all things, where they did a Jackie O challenge, and she's in the like a Chanel type suit. She's something gauzy on the yacht in Greece, and then there was just a photo of her walking down the street, a paparazzi photo, walking down the street in Manhattan, reading a book while she was walking, and that was the most interesting woman to me. And I really remember in that moment wanting to know more about who that iteration of Jackie was.
Love that. So to go back, sorry, because I messed up the question from the person that was asking you, Timothy, what are the revision process was most helpful for you when you were revising that, the feedback that you got? What was the most helpful feedback you got in the revision process?
The book that I wrote originally, the thing that Clementine was after, the object and the element of the relationship to perfume was, and what the Nazis were after, was something completely different. And so basically the intrigue and the espionage all hinged on some entirely different concept. And so my editor, before she even bought the book, she had to have a conversation with me about it to make it clear that had to be fixed. And so
that's kind of a big one.
Fine.
Fine.
I think so. That's all. I could do that. And so that, and I think that it's one of those things that when you come up with an idea early on, you think, oh, this is the thing that they're after, and it's all going to hinge on this. And you get to it and you're writing it, and it's like, okay, now it's not working, but I'm going to try to make it work. And then it ends, and it's like, okay, I couldn't quite make it work, but maybe that he'll notice.
Maybe nobody will notice that, but maybe they will.
I did make it work, or I think I got it as close as I could. And so she just basically said, no, it needs to be a little more captivating, and there needs to be more friction and drama, and it needs to relate more to the other material. And once we started that conversation, then it all just fell into place, and it did start to make sense to me.
Yeah. So maybe that's why they're good at what they do, right?
The editors, right? That's why I wrote a book celebrating them.
Yeah, exactly. And just a couple comments, and then we'll close out with
not
to
kiss up. Not to kiss up.
No, exactly. Somebody said earlier about when you're researching, librarians are a great resource for writers in whatever research process you're going through. Thanks, Amy, for that. And Absolutely. Arlene saying about the editor moments between Jackie and James are really fun and descriptive, and laugh out loud at all of Jackie's lines. So all good stuff. So we're going to close out. I love putting both of you on the spot a little bit. It's what we do here, right? But it's always when I get asked this question, I always blank. So they're curious about what both authors are reading right now, and if they have any hints on future projects. So Stephen, you want to start with that one?
Oh, goodness. I can always say, after I wrote The Editor, I read a lot of other books where authors had and put real life historical figures into fiction, because I always want to know after the fact how somebody tackles the challenge of what I've just done, because it is a very solitary process. I never want to do it while I'm doing it, because right. I don't want to seep.
Even though you might be a thief, you don't want to be that kind of thief.
Because I might be a thief. And so now, books that handle that sort of balance of heart and humor, like I hope that the Guncle does. I've been reading a lot of sort of comedic novels. Now I was late to the game on French Exit.
Wasn't that good?
Oh, yeah. I reread Less, which has some very sly comedy. There's a debut author. I always like to highlight a debut named Emily Austin, who wrote a book called Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead.
I've heard great things about it. I haven't read it yet.
I loved it. I truly loved it. And talk about great titles. Again, someone else putting me to shame. So those are a couple. Yeah.
And any new little projects you want to tell, either film or anything else you want to tell us about what you might be working on next?
Yeah, well, the Guncle's film rights have been purchased by Lionsgate, and I am writing the adaptation. So that's what I was busy doing right up until I got here today, which was why I may or may not have time to put on pants. So.
From here up, you look fabulous. fabulous from here up. And
But,
Timothy, how about you? Any books that you want to highlight or lift up, and what are you working on next?
So what I always read about like 6 books at once. And so I've been actually reading the Paris Hours. When I was writing about Paris, I didn't want to read any fiction about Paris. So I just was reading nonfiction because you don't want to be influenced in that way by somebody else's fictional approximation of the city. So Paris Hours by Alex George.
George, right? Yeah, that's Alex George. Yeah.
So I'm in conversation with him next week. So I wanted to be, I just love it. I adore it. But, and I'm also, and this is kind of a hint into the next book, but I'm reading a book called The Twilight Man about night, which is I'm expecting to provide some insights into 1920s Hollywood, which will be, so the next book I'm describing as a combination of The Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead plus Titanic plus Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So you can
just some small little themes there.
Add to cart. How do I pre-order more?
Exactly.
And now listen, I described my first book as a cross between, this was Lily and the Octopus, as a cross between Joan Didion's Year of Magical Thinking and Moby Dick. And I thought that was there as a pick. But Timothy has got me beat.
I think he's got you beat on that. What was it? Hollywood, Titanic, and what was the third one?
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, Maggie Shipstead, Great Circle, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I can't wait.
I do want to put in a few words for some former students of mine too have new books. Plain Bad Heroines by Emily Danforth is terrific, and I haven't yet read S.J. Sindhu's new book, Blue Skinned Gods, but that's around the corner as well. And Demisty Bellinger's book, the title, which I can't remember because she changed it. So but she has a terrific new novel coming out from Unnamed Press in the spring, and it's so heartwarming to see. And a student named Scott Gill has a new book called Plastic coming out from Pantheon, and it's just thrilling to see these writers
that must be
work
fun
so hard.
That must be almost part of that process.
It's amazing. It's amazing to see it come together for students because it is so hard. They do spend so much time on it, and they ignore so much of your advice. And
I love it. Well, it has been a great conversation. Stephen, thank you for your time. Timothy, thank you for your time as well. If you want to follow Stephen, website that you can direct people to is stephenrowley.com. Is that correct?
Yep. At Mr. Stephen Rowley, Mr. Stephen Rowley on Instagram and Twitter. You can come see. I just posted recently a tour of my caftan closet. So like the Gunkel wears caftans by the book. Use a tour of my caftan closet. Come take a look.
I love that. Oh, so great. And
I dressed like Stephen's book cover. So if I'm not wearing a caftan, but it might look like a caftan.
Might look like it,
yeah. No collar, you got a martini going.
But I don't have
smell-o-vision.
I don't have the
neither did I. That was an addition for the book cover. And Julie, I just want to thank you and thank everyone for tuning in and supporting independent bookstores. It's been a tough year, but you're still here. But we want you not just to survive, but to thrive. So everybody order a book. It doesn't, order Timothy's. It doesn't have to be mine. Just support independent bookstores. We need you.
I can't wait
here. Doing this again in person.
See both of you in person too at some point. Timothy, is there a website you can tell people to? Is it timothyschaffert.com?
timothyschaffert.com, and I'm on Instagram, and I post almost a daily drawing. So I do little cartoons in candy wrapper dresses, and you can tune in for that. And I try to keep up with that.
I love that. Well, thank you both. When we close out, we're going to close out. So have a wonderful rest of your evening, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.